Good afternoon and welcome to today's Adweek webinar, the Marketer's Guide to Evergreen CTV Ads, where we're going to be talking about somewhere that's evergreen and building a TV strategy for all seasons. Today's webinar is sponsored by Mountain. I'm Danielle Moore, Senior Manager here with Adweek's Content Studio, and I'll be your host today. Before we begin, just want to take a minute to make sure everyone knows what to expect from today's event and is familiar with the features of our platform here. The actual presentation should go somewhere in the 25 to 30 minute range, after which we'll have time for audience Q&A. So if at any point you have a question for our speaker, just use that Q&A tool right beneath the video window on your screen, and we'll get to as many questions as we can after the end of the presentation. Also, not too late to invite your colleagues to join us today. About 15 minutes ago, you should have received a final reminder email from us, and in there you can find a link to the webinar registration page you can share with your colleagues. Still plenty of time for them to join us today, but if they can't, do know that today's webinar is being recorded, and they can always catch the on-demand version. In fact, that recording will be available to all registrants, and we'll send you a link to that later today when it's live around 3:30 to 4 p.m. Eastern or so. And if you would like a PDF of today's slides, you can find those in the event resources area right beneath the video window on your screen. As always, if you enjoyed today's webinar, be sure to check out the full schedule of upcoming events at adweek.com/webinars, which is also linked below. And also in that event resources area, you can find a link to Adweek's resource library, where we add new guides, white papers, and other content regularly, as well as a blog from Mountain. So be sure to check all of that out. Now, let me introduce you to today's speaker. We're very happy to be joined by Allie Lindley, Senior Customer Success Manager at Mountain. Allie builds relationships with Mountain clients to help them achieve their long-term CTV and business goals. Collaborating and iterating are her favorite part of her work. All right, we've got a lot of great content to dive into today. So without further ado, let me bring Allie up on screen here to get us started. Welcome, Allie. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Danielle. Yeah, I like that. I like that bio. And I really like what we're talking about today. Pleased to be talking with all of you about how to build a TV strategy for all seasons. My bio says I like iterating and collaborating, but really it's just figuring out how to make CTV really work well for brands. And that's what an evergreen strategy is a huge part of. So today, our key takeaway, my thing I hope you ultimately remember at the end, is the way that an evergreen strategy reinforces seasonal campaigns and what's going on kind of in the moment, and how you can use evergreen to complement upfront buys and generally to create this really significant like year-round performance engine. So today's agenda, we have a few things we're going to work through, kind of talking through seasonal and upfront and how to kind of contextualize the both of them, talking through the benefit of evergreen seasonal campaigns, and then alongside the creative challenges that come with that and a little bit of nuance that's required there. And then finally, a few best practices and just success stories from Mountain customers. I'm really pleased. The ones we picked today are some of my very own customers and strategies that we've worked out kind of in collaboration through various iterations. So just to jump right into it, it's really kind of the peak of upfront season. So many of you, I'm sure, are thinking through kind of how we make buys that align with our business and strategy for the whole year. And while upfronts and new fronts are really important, figuring out how to take that content that's really seasonal and make it evergreen is kind of essential. If you're only around at a few key moments, it's not the way to really win mind share. And the reality is you never know when a customer's ready to buy. So getting in someone's mind and helping them move down the funnel, but also like bringing them into the funnel at the key moment is essential. And so if their key moment and your key moment with your upfront buy aren't the same, you're going to run into performance channels or challenges there. So thinking about how to really supplement these holiday and key moments with evergreen is going to keep people moving down the funnel year round, which is obviously essential. Yeah, and so when we talk about evergreen, it feels like an upsell strategy, but in reality, it's a performance strategy. And there's a kind of an art to figuring out at what level do you need to be running always on to keep your costs really efficient and to keep your creative really efficient, and then thinking kind of more holistically how that combines with those upfront buys. So a key thing that we talk about with evergreen is how it boosts seasonal efficiency. So if you're running evergreen and you have something, live in September and October as you head into Q4, and then you're making that big push in November, having been kind of on people's radar and a part of people's key thinking is really what helps drive that, drive the power of your seasonal buy or of whatever you're doing in that key moment. So that consistent opportunistic approach is what helps drive sustained growth. And I think as we talk about it in a couple of the case studies, you'll really be able to see of how they best complement each other. Additionally, if you just think about kind of the performance tactic underneath it, you can think about like the friction of starting and stopping, having those ramp up and periods and then those drop offs. So for your business, generally what we see is the evergreen running is what kind of boosts efficacy. Yeah, I would normally say, do you guys have any questions? But I think they're all going to go at the end. So kind of moving along and thinking about how we do this. A huge part of an evergreen strategy is evergreen creative and CTV. So as brands are relying more on CTV, it's easy to think of like making a commercial as something that you do for this big moment. So you have your commercial for the Super Bowl, or your commercial for Q4 and your holiday retail push. Takes a lot of planning, takes a lot of production, and takes a lot of money out of your actual media buy and puts it toward that. So a huge part of an evergreen strategy is having a creative partner that streamlines video production. So being able to deliver quantity, quality, and like efficiently, speed, and then embracing a production approach that gives you a lot of options. So something that we really emphasize here is the ability to test, the ability to iterate, change things, and be really dynamic with your creative. And evergreen creative that works really well is something that like draws on maybe what you're doing for a seasonal moment, but just changes a minor thing that kind of makes it be usable year round or usable for a longer term. And a great example of that is like something as simple as changing an end card, which doesn't sound that innovative to me because I talk about it probably every day. But using just those final few seconds of your CTV ad and taking those to, changing those to highlight whatever seasonal moment it is, or highlight an evergreen offer, or just a really clear call to action is what makes it really easy to pivot quickly. CTV dollars, CTV is claiming more ad dollars. And so that risk of creative fatigue is higher, but using simple changes and having a partner that can help you make those quick changes is a huge part of using that for performance and being able to kind of balance the evergreen and seasonal push and pull. So creating creative and making more for less. Quick Frame is obviously our in-house mountain creative arm. And we think of them as like a non-agency option. So they can basically just turn out creative really quickly and work as a kind of an extra arm. There's a world of arms there in that picture, but work as an extra arm to your team when you need something quick and something efficient, but something really high quality. And so simplifying and streamlining that is kind of how we most often recommend and how so many of our partners end up making creative that will work for whatever purpose they need and throughout the year. Our maker community is, thousands of production houses that are on hand at all times to make it so that they can turn something around in no time. We have someone who it was one of my customers. They signed their contract last weekend and they have their shoot tomorrow. And they were like, we needed to get the contract done just so that they would be ready for this May 8th shoot because they had a few things going on in their business. Like today was the day. And seeing the speed at which they can turn that around is fantastic and kind of stunning. I'm like, sheer number of emails coming through about it is wild, but I'm like, wow, they're going to have an ad in 2 weeks from the day that they sign their contract because it's all hands on deck and the process is really efficient. But thinking about the ads that they're going to get out of that and what it is to be evergreen. The kind of running premise here at Mountain is that you already have an evergreen ad. You can take your seasonal ad and make it evergreen with just a few tweaks. So like I said, change out your end card. And then thinking about spreading out your budget in a really efficient way. So obviously you want to increase your spending these key moments when you can harness and drive as much revenue as possible. But if you're saving some cash on creative and you are being strategic with that, there should be some budget that we can spread out a little bit more efficiently, even in those quieter months, so that you're building up site visitors, you're building up people that are familiar with your brand, and can have even a bigger impact during those holiday moments. So what we say is that those small creative changes have a big impact on eliminating fatigue. I always think about creative fatigue like the Post-it note that I have on my desk. And you look at it the first few days, and then you eventually stop noticing that reminder to do X, Y, or Z thing that you really should be doing every day. The same thing happens when you start playing the same ad every day, and people are seeing it, and then they're just not really seeing it. It's just playing in the background. They don't even notice. So making those changes is what catches people's eye. Changes to color, changes to copy, little things that, drive that performance year round that we're really trying to find. Something mandatory participation sounds so aggressive, but something that we talk about a lot is like the value of the ad unit at Mountain, where our audience targeting is just like what you would find and comparable to what you'd find on something like social. Our ad unit is distinct because it has mandatory participation. It is premium and non-skippable. And so unless they literally change the channel or turn off the TV, most people are watching fully through your ad, over 97%, I think. So what that does is drive higher recall and really gets people kind of most engaged. So that does bring along the risk of ad fatigue. And we don't want to waste any of your media budget. We don't want to have any negative audience sentiment because they see the same ad 5 million times. And we obviously don't want to push back against performance. So that's kind of where going back, these minor changes and not reinventing the wheel, but refreshing the wheel keeps performance moving in the right direction. And kind of to dive in a little bit deeper to these holiday moments that we're talking about. What we're seeing kind of across the board is brands really continuing to emphasize holiday spending. Obviously, we all work in advertising. Q4 is this big moment, but then we have Memorial Day coming up, Labor Day, these key moments for different industries where they're like, oh yeah, we spend a lot, or back to school, Father's Day, Mother's Day, graduation. There's all these key moments, and depending on your business, you obviously know what they are, and they're seared into your mind as like, days you're going to really be working. But taking those and like supercharging those, and CTV becomes like a hugely profitable way to do that. And so taking your Evergreen campaign and I think a nice way of thinking about it is, this is a metaphor that I didn't run by the marketing team before I ran this webinar, but a way of thinking about it is just like consistently watering your plants so that you can harvest during your big seasonal moment. And give your campaigns obviously time to ramp up, give your audience time to consider their purchase. And what that does is cultivate stronger performance all the time. We call it the holiday hammock, which is like those 2 periods between October and Black Friday. There's usually this like little peak, and then obviously a little lull as people are like, okay, I'm not going to spend until the next big sale. But using that period between to drive awareness and consideration before people are purchasing becomes huge for actual return on ad spend, which is what we're here to deliver. So kind of want to talk about just general best practices as we think about Evergreen, especially in the context of these bigger moments. Obviously, starting with Evergreen lead in. So maybe your creative isn't super specific to that moment. Maybe it's just a general brand ad, or the call to action is just like visit the site versus, come today for 40% off. And thinking about then just the allocation between prospecting and retargeting, especially in the lead up, emphasizing prospecting a bit is what will help build that huge pool that drives impact further on down the line. So 3 to 6 weeks ahead as like a general rule is a great time to do that. And then using that remaining budget for retargeting and lower funnel efforts, which should be launched at the same time. I like to emphasize prospecting more at the beginning. So let's say it's like a 90-10, 2 months out. And then 1 month out, it's like a 80-20 or a 60-40. And then as we shift into your key moment, emphasizing retargeting more so that we can kind of reap the benefits or harvest what we've been watering that whole time. Another thing to keep in mind, especially in this earlier kind of pre-period where we're just watering and cultivating that audience and getting ready, is the power of testing. Back to my bio, love to iterate, but using testing as an opportunity to get a sense of what's resonating with your audience, what sort of call to actions, what sort of tone or music, if you're having voiceover or not, and knowing that before your key moment, so that when it's time to really drive performance, when it's whatever that major date is for your guys' business, you know everything that you need to know. So that's testing in September to understand a little bit better, refining your test in October, and then in November, you're doing the very best of the best for this big moment. And you feel total confidence that, hey, we need a 30-second ad. This voiceover works better than that. People are really responding to this call to action more to that. And that's what will help. And part of the value of having that evergreen is helping to drive that performance at a key moment. Fun. This is my favorite part. Kind of as we kind of round out the conversation of how evergreen and seasonal work together, would love to talk about Mountain Mike's Pizza. They're a customer of mine that I've been working with for years now, but they are a case study, here we are, in using evergreen and then like really capitalizing on key moments. So every Valentine's Day, they run a heart-shaped pizza promo, but obviously they're live all through January and before that, to be able to kind of build up their audience. A key thing that they do as well is they run evergreen prospecting in the radius of each location. And so that kind of evergreen budget, and as they launch new locations, they add more budget just to that location, building up awareness. But then it's a promo for wings, or it's a heart-shaped pizza, or it's the Super Bowl, or it's a general Friday and you have kids and you're just trying to order a pizza, and they are top of mind for our brands. And so something that's huge on Mountain is the flexibility and ease of creative swaps. So they have a hugely busy marketing calendar, their franchisees, and everyone has to be on board with it. And so they're running these nationally centered CTV ads or CTV campaigns. And they're super dynamic based on whatever the promo is, whatever the discount for hot wings, or, whatever their thing is. I'm not going to make up products for them. That's risky. But really what we see for them is performance. Comparing like 2021 to 22 to 23 and even Q1 of 24, seeing significant gains in their return on ad spend in particular, but even metrics like cost per visit, which is huge for them, of just like getting people aware of the brand, especially in new markets. They're seeing people coming to the site and really engaging, which is fantastic. Another brand that we love to talk about that I love personally is Tuckernuck. Been working with them for quite a while now, and seeing them grow so quickly that the best way to look at their performance is quarter over quarter, because it's, leaps and bounds. But they are running evergreen CTV and then using Q4, like most retail, to really, step on the gas. And what they're seeing is that the increase in audience size that they're getting from CTV prospecting throughout the year is what's really fueling their ability to scale and feel confident in their ability to scale during Q4. They have boosted viewers and engagement, and their holiday season is, always an absolute boon. They're another one that's taking what they won in Q4 and still saw great success in Q1 as well. So their return on ad spend has increased, their conversion rates increased, and their cost per visit is 26% lower. So I think a key thing underlying that too is just the influence of the ad unit that they're getting on CTV. They're really telling a story, and they're really getting people on board with the aspirational and attainable lifestyle of their brand. And it's really easy to do on CTV and with this kind of ad unit. And especially for retail, for them, it's like a simple matter of adjusting the type of clothing that they're highlighting, or the end card, and whatever, promotional moment they might be emphasizing. So that's another great one. And I have one more. This customer is Rumpel, another near and dear Mountain brand. But from 2021 to 2022, we saw them hugely increase their seasonal, like Q4 investment, 20% increase in spend, and still driving a near 5x return on ad spend, well above their target. And yeah, for them, just running this evergreen campaign creative that they're adjusting, every just over 2 months that they're adjusting it. And really what they're doing is changing out the voiceover, changing out their end cards, and just making these small changes to highlight promotions that keeps people really engaged. And so another brand there that was able to scale super profitably. So I feel like seeing the actual examples helps make sense of what it looks like in practice. But just to kind of round it out, I think the main things, as I mentioned at the top, are savvy brands are really using these evergreen campaigns to boost them during seasonal holiday moments. They're delivering performance lifts and making their seasonal moments more effective. And then just kind of a reassurance that you can repurpose that evergreen creative for seasonal pushes and vice versa to minimize the demand of production costs and resources. And those frequent minor changes are what prevent ad fatigue and really help promote performance. So that's really how we think of evergreen creative, and even in the context of upfronts, when you're so focused on these key moments, how we can use those to drive performance year round that's really meaningful for the business. To round out our webinar today, I would love to take a few questions, talk through kind of practical applications of this.
Awesome. Thank you so much for those insights, Allie. As you mentioned, we do have time to take a few questions here. We're going to get to as many as we can over the next 5 to 10 minutes or so. But to our audience members, please know that if we don't get to your question live today, we always make sure they get forwarded over to our speaker so they have the opportunity to possibly reply offline. A couple other quick reminders here from Adweek. Today's webinar has been recorded and will be available later today. Keep an eye out for the link to the recording. And if you'd like a copy of today's slides or to check out the blog that Mountain has shared, be sure to grab all of that from the event resources area right beneath the video window on your screen. All right, now let's jump into some of these questions. So first of all, Allie, I have to say our audience has been loving these best practices you've been sharing about combating creative fatigue, which is a very real problem. So there are a couple of questions here about it. The one I want to start with is, can you give some more best practices to combating creative fatigue, other ideas that folks can nibble on?
Yeah, absolutely. How I think on that. But general creative fatigue, so I've shared the key ones, change your call to action, things like that. But another thing to keep in mind is just you want to purpose build your creative for your performance campaigns from the very beginning. So something like keeping in mind your target audience is huge. So if you have different audiences that you're trying to reach, then you can strategize your creative production so that maybe you're changing out the age of the people that are featuring, and you're shooting almost the same thing, but with slightly different people. And so you're kind of multiplying efficiency in your production that way. Another thing to keep in mind is just like the hook and the script. So maybe you can have different voiceover for different audience segments. You have the first 3 to 5 seconds for every ad. So thinking about what that hook does to keep them from, walking away from the screen or picking up their phone, is knowing the value of that hook allows you to kind of think through, okay, who are we getting in front of? So making variations like in real time during production is a huge one. And then another one would just be kind of switching out those hooks, switching out the voiceover, switching out the end cards. And yeah, I think, but generally just keeping it in mind as you're doing production, and then basically purpose building so that you know what would make it really easy to like isolate certain elements. So isolating your call to action, isolating your URL throughout, having that on-screen call to action and URL is huge for performance. And so being able to switch those out really easily is another really kind of low lift way to combat creative fatigue.
I love that. I love the way you're expressing that in terms of wanting to build it so that elements can be switched out and played with and tested. So good to keep all of that in mind. I want to jump from that question to another related one while we're on this topic. We have someone asking, what's the average time it takes for a creative to fatigue across your clients? Probably varies by industry, I'm guessing, but we'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So it does vary a little bit. Our general best practice is give it 3 months. That is probably the healthy max. But with that, I want to just kind of reassure people that doesn't mean you need to be doing a new production every 3 months. Again, that's try a new end card, try new voiceover. If you have the capacity, by all means, like, yeah, let's keep it really fresh. But every 3 months or so, having a new call to action or a new voiceover, even to like layer over the same exact screen, will grab people's attention in a new way.
Thanks for sharing that. Okay, next question. Even with creative refreshes, if everyone is doubling down on CTV ads, won't viewers just get sick of seeing them in general? So kind of an inventory overall question, but we'd love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I personally think generally no, but kind of a more broad answer is thinking about kind of other ad channels. Most people have learned to kind of ignore or like hate ads. You know, you're scrolling on whatever and you're like, why am I seeing like another ad for another thing that I don't need? CTV is a little bit different. TV commercials are inherent as part of TV. And as more streaming services are investing in this really high quality content, audiences have more services to choose from, but they're also starting to feel like the cost of that. And yeah, having all these different streaming service options, a key thing for them is just like cost. Most people are choosing to have ad supported services to save on costs. I think the number is like around 70% of people are choosing ad supported to save money. And then 79% of viewers, I have this talking point here, 79% of viewers prefer ad supported CTV viewing over having a paid premium model. So because of that, and then another thing is just like the nimbleness and like how easy it is to change out creative is keeping people from feeling like the pain of like constant barrage of the exact same ads. And this is like when your brand updates the campaign creative to keep it feeling lively and fresh, users are feeling that and it kind of keeps them engaged. And again, they don't have to make for a radically different campaign, but having those small changes are keeping people from feeling too fatigued. And these ad-supported offerings are helping people like feel a part of watching their favorite shows and keeping them from the FOMO of missing out on whatever cultural moment it is, because they get to watch it for $6.99 a month because it's ad-supported. So I always try to figure out, like, for a while I thought working in CTV was, and like working in advertising, and I was like, what's the value here, like emotionally and personally? And then I realized, I think it was my manager told me, she's like, it's really cool if you think about like the value of ads make for content to be more accessible and free to people. And that's kind of a surprising, like little delightful part of working in advertising, is thinking like this enables other people to access content and information. And so if you think about like ad supported as a part of that, and you know, ads being generally good in that way, then you can kind of think, okay, so this creative has value to people.
Well said. The numbers really paint that picture, right? When you bring up those statistics, if folks were really getting fatigued on it, they would be flocking to the premium options if they could, right? So I think that's a really great point, and appreciate hearing your personal philosophy on working in advertising too. We here at Adweek definitely feel very similarly, so appreciate all of that. So these case studies that you shared today, I loved all of them. I particularly loved Mountain Mike's, because it just sounds like Mountain and Mountain Mike's should be a perfect fit. We have somebody here asking about any B2B clients that you could speak to. Particularly the question is, have you seen success with B2B clients on CTV, and is there scalability for those clients?
Absolutely. The short answer is yes. The long answer is basically everything that I shared today applies to B2B brands just as well. One of my largest customers that I work with is a B2B brand who is kind of stunned by the scalability of the channel. They started out with these, you know, little baby budgets at campaign minimums, and now they're running hundreds of thousands of dollars per month on CTV, and seeing really significant scalable success, seeing their performance really kind of elastic and like holding steady with these increases in spend. B2B brands, and like what's interesting, the challenge of them is it's not like selling t-shirts. They have a really narrow target audience, and CTV has this super granular and customizable targeting that really works in the favor of B2B brands. Maybe even more so than someone selling, you know, retail apparel. It's essential that B2B brands get in front of the right people, and CTV allows them to do that. And it's kind of a new thing, but previously, like until CTV, there was no way to deploy that really deep audience targeting on TV. And so that left linear ad buys and kind of a guessing game. You're like, well, I hope they watch, CNBC. They probably do because they're in business. But being able to get in the exact right household of these decision makers for B2B brands has been really essential. And it helps brands stand out against competition. It's not as effective and efficient as it is because it's newer. These B2B brands are really standing out against their competition. And target audiences are not used to seeing a B2B brand on TV. So kind of has this standout moment and elevates like brand clout and image. And I guess a huge thing here is you never really know when your prospects will buy. And B2B purchases have this like longer sales cycle. It requires more research, decision-making. There's multiple people in the buying decision. So having that constant presence on CTV, as I said, it elevates your brand image, but also kind of keeps you top of mind. And yeah, I think in a world where even I am constantly getting these like cold emails and cold calls from business brands, I'm like, oh my gosh, you have no idea. I'm not the decision maker on this. But you start tuning that out and you stop really hearing that. And I know I spent some time in sales, and people just start like slamming down cold calls. They're not ready for it. So getting on CTV ends up being so much more effective. You end up targeting your audience after hours. They're relaxing. Their guard is down, and it kind of makes them more receptive to take further action. And a lot of CTV fraud actually occurs at the impression level to take advantage of these CPM pricing models. And I think that something really refreshing about Mountain is how transparent our reporting is. And it removes those blind spots and gives people like actual data to identify and respond to suspicious activity. And then our integrations with Google Analytics and Rockerbox give you that extra layer of accountability and visibility and transparency, all of it, so that you can measure actual outcomes and see how people are actually converting to drive performance.
Comprehensive answer there. Thank you very much for going in depth on that one. So we have a question here about brick and mortar retailers in particular. Someone asks, would you revise or I guess add to any of your evergreen creative suggestions for brick and mortar retailers specifically? In other words, anything that these folks need to be taking into consideration in addition if they are emphasizing brick and mortar retail?
Yeah, I mean, Mountain Mike's is an amazing one for that. I don't need to pop back on the slide, but Mountain Mike's, what's fantastic about their performance is it's only measuring online, but they're doing third-party delivery apps, and they have brick and mortar sales that are also being boosted by this effort. That's kind of all ships rise. A newer product at Mountain actually allows us to do offline attribution as well, and match back those brick and mortar sales to households that are receiving CTV ads. So with that, you can know and have better visibility and impact of those ads. Your creative doesn't need to change as much. And it's honestly an opportunity for you to do even more testing and say like, oh, if our call to action references our brick and mortar locations or pushes people find a location, and you're pushing people maybe to like company.com/locations as opposed to company.com. Like, how does that do for brick and mortar sales? And looking at year-over-year trends and understanding of the impact of your creative on your brick and mortar sales. But I see kind of fantastic performance of people using CTV for both brick and mortar and online retail or online kind of conversions.
Got it. Okay, we've got time for one more question here. Digging into this creative question once again. This question, I think, also speaks to the funnel and how we should be thinking about things if you're looking to take that into consideration as you're working with CTV, as you should be. Someone asked, does prospecting and retargeting creative need to be different? And if you want to add any guidance there on how they should be different.
Yeah, this is fun. I love Q&A personally because I like not knowing what's coming. But prospecting and retargeting creative, need is a very strong word. It doesn't need to be different, but it really can be different. And what I like to kind of encourage advertisers to do is think of just their user journey. Someone that's never heard of their brand might really benefit from kind of a more brand-focused storytelling prospecting ad that's maybe 30 seconds instead of 15. And it introduces them to the brand and what it's like to kind of experience this brand or own this brand or be a part of it. And then still has that call to action at the end, like visit website.com to see more products or visit website.com. shop now at website.com. And then retargeting has an opportunity. These are people that are already engaged and they've already been to your site. So it's not like you need to introduce them to the brand. They're bought in enough to go to the website. So what you can do is use that to really drive home the value of your product. So let's say it's luggage. You can make a beautiful video emphasizing like the zippers and the pulls and what it's like to get to the airport with your bag and how opening it up is so beautiful and your stuff doesn't fly everywhere. That's fantastic creative that makes people think like, yes, I need that bag, versus like, oh, I've never heard of that brand, I want that. So just thinking through kind of the whole user journey, and even thinking about like retention creative and CRM, and what will bring people back, what makes people come back again, and using that third, you can have a third type of creative that is purpose built for that. So you can very much purpose build at each stage of the funnel and have creative that helps you reach those goals. Maybe it's visits for prospecting and revenue for retargeting. But in the same breath, if you don't have the capacity, small changes like your end card, or no changes and be like, this is our CTV video, and I still see fantastic performance from brands.
Thank you for walking us through that, Allie. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have for questions today. I'd like to thank our speaker, Allie Lindley, as well as our sponsor, Mountain. Some final reminders here from Adweek. Make sure you grab those slides from the Event Resources tab and check your email for a link to the on-demand recording, which will be available later today. And if you enjoyed today's webinar, be sure to check out the Adweek webinars calendar to learn more about our upcoming events at adweek.com/webinars. Again, huge thank you to Allie for being here today and for letting us pick your brain during this Q&A session. Thank you to our audience for joining us live today. And as always, we look forward to seeing everyone at an upcoming Adweek webinar. Thank you all.